I want to introduce to you, please, Dr. Jennifer Roback Morse from the Ruth Institute, which is part of the National Organization for Marriage. That's right, National Organization for Marriage, NOM. Jennifer Roback Morse has come even further than Los Angeles to be with us today. She has come from the far reaches of San Diego, California.
Wow.
She brings knowledge and experience on a variety of topics, with a variety of perspectives. What she is going to talk to us today about is marriage without adjectives. Why are words so important? Words are important because language is a reflection of reality. You can talk to me about that after the conference if you want to go to that statement. What we're going to do right now is here and welcome Dr. Morse to talk about marriage without adjectives.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm really excited about being here. I woke up at 4 in the morning to work on my speech. I'm so excited. Bishop Corleone used to be our bishop down in San Diego, and so you all took him. But we were crazy about him too. And before we start, I want to just point out that my assistants are passing out a handout that goes with this lecture, because I want you to have something to take away with you. So you're getting one sheet of paper notes to go with this lecture. We also, I want to just mention that we have a number of free items in the back the Ruth Institute does. The mission of the Ruth Institute is to promote lifelong married love to college students. And as you probably know, the National Organization for Marriage is the political arm of the marriage movement. They're the ones who produce TV ads and, harass candidates and, do different things like that. The Ruth Institute is an educational organization. If I had to do the same 3 message points for an entire campaign, I would go crazy, but that's what political people have to do. And so I do the educational college outreach portion of the National Organization for Marriage. In the Ruth Institute, I don't know how many of you know this, but the life movement, the pro-life movement, is really a women's movement. Do you all know that? Have you all noticed that? Okay, and if you go to the West Coast Walk for Life, did you notice that it was a youth movement?
Yeah.
Did you all notice that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to see the marriage movement become a women's movement and a youth movement. And if you look at the young ladies who are passing out the sheets of paper, the other young lady who's gone to that, you'll see the Ruth Institute is always in some danger of being a girl outfit, a chick outfit. And so we're always trying to get guys to come to our events, right? Because it's women who care about these issues. So I always tell the guys, look, there's usually 2 to 1 girls to boys at our events. You should really come to the events. And that seems to work for the target audience of guys that we're interested in. Anyway, so in addition to these handouts that we're giving out in the free material, we also have a sign-up sheet for the newsletter of the Ruth Institute. And I want to just take a minute to mention this to you. This is a weekly newsletter that we send out, which I consider to be a significant project of the Ruth Institute. It's all electronic, so it's very inexpensive for us to do. It's a very high leverage thing. But every week we have one featured article, and then we have a campus corner where we talk about what our students are doing around the country. And then we always have some little feature such as a marriage quiz or a marriage tip or something like that. So last week the featured article was on polygamy. Just to show you, we cover the whole range of issues in the marriage movement. Did you know that the government of Canada is talking about legalizing polygamy? You probably didn't know that, but they are. So if you read the Ruth Institute newsletter, you will know things like that. This week coming up, there is a quiz, a marriage quiz, and I'll tell you what it is, even though, so if you get it, if you sign up and get it in your inbox, you'll know the answer. And the quiz is this. The reason I'm mentioning it to you is because it's related to Francis Beckwith's talk. The question in the quiz is, of the women who presented themselves for abortion in 2004, what percentage of them were married? What percentage of women who had abortions in 2004 were married? And the answer is 14%. Okay, 14% of women who came for abortions were married. Now, the reason that's significant is because it answers the question that you all were pestering him about at the end, which is, why is it that in spite of having all the logic on your side, people continue to hold with their pro-choice views? The reason is because people are engaging in sexual activity in a context that cannot possibly support a pregnancy. They're being sexual in relationships that cannot sustain a pregnancy. And so therefore they think they need abortion. So if in that way, the marriage issue and the life issue are very closely related. And the fact that people are scared to get married, the fact that young people are afraid to get married, is a significant fact in driving the demand for abortion. You see? So all of these things are related in my mind. And we talk about divorce and cohabitation and premarital sex and just a whole range of issues that we believe are relevant to young people in talking about, in dealing with the whole marriage issue. So have you ever heard advocates of same-sex marriage saying to you something like, you know, if you really want to protect marriage, why don't you do something about divorce? You know, they sort of storm off and so on. Right? Well, they can't pin that on me, because I've been working on the divorce question for a long time. And so I want to start by just telling you a little bit about how I got involved in the marriage movement, because I think it will interest you. My PhD is not in psychology or law or anything like that. My doctorate's actually in economics, of all things. And the first book that I wrote is called Love and Economics, which is kind of an unlikely combination of things. But so how did an economics professor end up doing this type of work? What was that all about? How did that come about? Well, my plan for myself, I got my doctorate in 1980, and my plan for myself was that I was going to get tenure at a major university. My first teaching job was at Yale. I didn't get tenure there. No one gets tenure at Yale. That's the rule. So they kicked me out, as they kick out everyone. And I went to George Mason for 10 years, and I was teaching there. My plan was that I would get tenure at Mason. I would have my baby during the summer, and I would put the baby in daycare in September and go right back to work. Oh, by the way, I was married, because in those days you still had to be married before you had kids. So that was my plan for myself. And I see some of you, kind of smiling about that, that I had that all worked out and everything. Often, if I say that on a college audience, the girls will look at me like, yeah, so what was wrong with them? What happened then? They don't get that this was kind of a nutty plan. But anyway, so imagine my surprise when the baby did not arrive during the month that I had set aside for it. Okay, and so my husband and I were confronted with a 4.5-year infertility crisis, which for me was a whole crisis of faith. And it was a crisis of faith that brought me back to the practice of the Catholic faith, which was the church of my childhood. Because infertility was the first time in my adult life that I couldn't get what I wanted by trying harder, by following all the rules, by being smart, and all of that kind of stuff. Any sensible old wife will tell you you don't solve this infertility crisis by trying harder. That's the last thing you need to be doing. But anyway, that was my whole plan for myself, and God kind of pulled the rug out from under that whole thing and brought me back to himself in that way. So that's how I found my way back into the practice of the Catholic faith. And we resolved our infertility crisis in 1990 when we filed to adopt from Romania. And we had completely given up on ever having any children. We filed our papers, with the adoption agency. And in January 1991, we got a call from the adoption agency saying, we have a little boy for you. He's from Romania. He'll be 2.5 by the time you get him. We know his name, and that he's described as being in good health. What do you say? And we said, sure, why not? And then 10 days later, I went to the doctor with a head cold and found out that I was pregnant. So we had 2 children in 6 months' time, which is a record even for a Catholic. And it kind of told me I was back in the faith, back in the practice of faith. I have 2 kids back to back like that. But anyway, as you can imagine, nothing in my economics training prepared me for what we were going to have to deal with next. Okay, and my husband is an engineer, and so therefore, if anything, perhaps even less prepared for this whole thing we were about to face. And so here we are, a pair of nerds, me, my economist, my husband, engineer, and we have these 2 kids in our home, and we look at it, what do we see? Well, we see a controlled experiment, of course, right? And what is the experiment? The experiment is, what difference does it make whether you have a mom and a dad in your life? What difference does it make whether you have a mom and a dad in your life? And of course, it makes a huge difference. Because our little guy, who had been in a minimal care orphanage, of course, had a lot of issues that we had to deal with. And his peers, there were a whole lot of kids that came over from Eastern Europe around that time. We were in the first batch of people who got those Eastern European kids. And there were a lot of issues that they all had to deal with. There were issues that had a lot in common with each other. And so we came to see just how significant the mother and father really are in the life of children. As economists, you know, we always just kind of assume adults, right? We just assume everybody's already a functioning adult and shows up ready to play, ready to make contracts, do deals, and the whole thing, you know? We never ask ourselves, where do these grown-ups all come from? Where do they come from, these adults, right? And so we have completely overlooked the whole issue of how mothers and fathers and that whole sector of social life really keep social life going. Without moms and dads doing their job, there's no economy, there's no politics, there's no society. Right? And so the first book that I wrote was called Love and Economics, and it's really about mothers. It was really about the attachment of mothers to their children and how socially significant that is. And in the course of doing the research for that book, I realized that it's not just mommies. It's very important what mommies do, but they need daddy in the picture too. You know, you need mom and dad working together as a team, and there's just so much evidence on the subject of marriage being a great good for children. That marriage is a great good for children. That the substitutes for marriage really don't work very well. And that mom and dad working together as a team are the ones that are creating a social being. And taking this little bundle of desires, and I thought it was hilarious that these philosophers don't get desire, you know. I mean, little kids are little bundles of impulses, right? And the whole trick is to get them from being little bundles of impulses, desires, and whatever, into some kind of functioning adults who can use their freedom without bothering people too much, you know. Because the average 2-year-old does not respect property rights. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but they don't, right? So somebody has to work on them, you know, to make that happen. So in any case, that was back, that book came out in 2001. And when I first started doing the publicity for that book and giving lectures on it and so on, someone would almost always ask me a question about same-sex marriage. In 2001, there'd be, in an audience like this one, about this side, there'd be somebody who'd raise their hand and say, well, Dr. Morse, what about same-sex marriage? And I would always say, well, look, it's my job to straighten out the straight people, and that's a full-time job. So I don't have anything to say about same-sex marriage, you know, and everybody would laugh and we'd sort of move on, but I really didn't want to deal with it. You know, I didn't want to talk about it. It's kind of a bummer of a topic, actually, isn't it? I mean, is there anybody who really likes talking about same-sex marriage? No, it's really kind of a bummer to talk about. So that's where things were 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was barely a blip on the radar screen. So because I have all this data and knowledge about marriage generally, I got dragged into the subject of same-sex marriage, more or less kicking and screaming. And so I was involved in the campaign for Proposition 8. That's how I came to be acquainted with Bishop Corleone. And in the course of 2008, Proposition 8, we produced a variety of materials that were helpful educational materials to help the public understand what some of the issues are involved in the whole question of same-sex marriage.